Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in Studio West, joined by Ilya Shapiro, Director of Constitutional Studies at the Manhattan Institute, old friend of the program, who I saw fleetingly at lunch inside the Beltway. I think he's probably still inside the Beltway, though I'm in fire-ravaged California. Ilya's got a new book, Lawless, and I'm going to say Lawless at least 7 times following the lunch rule, so you go out and buy it, because Ilya is about the smartest guy running around on the collapse of basically everything. And why. Ilya, welcome. How are you?
Great to be with you, Hugh. I'm actually in New York. This is my Manhattan residency. If Billy Joel can do it, I figured I can with my new book, Lawless. Repeat that again and again.
Again and again. Now, I have a confession, Ilya. You may be the only author I've had on the last 25 years I've been doing this program that I have not read your book. That's because I moved from the Beltway out to California and left it in D.C. And so I'm flying blind here, but I have an idea that you're going to be able to tell us what the miseducation of America's elites, that's the subtitle of Lawless, is about. And then we're going to turn to the California fires because we've had the collapse of government out here. Absolutely a disaster, a catastrophe that did not have to happen because of the lawlessness of Los Angeles and California. So let's start with an overview of the book. Why did you write it? What's in it?
Sure. And by the way, I'm guest blogging at the Volokh Conspiracy on the Reason website. It gives you a little summary of 5 different chapters every day this week. And this book comes out of my so-called lived experience with Georgetown Law. 3 years ago, I was about to join the Georgetown faculty to be the director of the Center for the Constitution, which we've since learned is an important center because the rest of the law school is a center against the Constitution. But anyhow, I was tweeting and commenting about my bread and butter, Supreme Court politics, the subject of my last book, Supreme Disorder, not to be confused with this book, Lawless. I was getting more and more upset about President Biden hewing to his promise to appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. Now, I have no problem with black women or black women on the Supreme Court, but you should pick the most qualified person, whether you're looking for a janitor or a Supreme Court justice. And I tweeted this out, could have phrased it better, but away we went. I ended up being investigated for 4 months on whether I was harassing or discriminating against someone by Georgetown. And, Hugh, I thought I knew what I was getting into going into academia, but this really crystallized for me the failures of ideology, bureaucracy, and leadership, not just in higher education more broadly, as we're seeing now, the disastrous testimony of the university presidents in December of 2023 and all that, but legal education specifically. And that's particularly dangerous because while it's sad if English or sociology departments go off the rails, law schools are creating the next generation of gatekeepers of our legal and political institutions. And if they believe, those lawyers, that there's no objective truth and your rights depend on where you are in a privilege hierarchy or what have you, that will lead to the downfall of the republic.
Now, as my audience knows, I'm a professor of law at Chapman University Fowler School of Law and have been since 1995. I am now, since I'm tenured, I can call my own shots, and I come back every other year during my broadcast years until I retire to teach Con Law 1 and the First and 14th Amendment. And I now have thrown out the case book and I'm using Randy Barnett and Josh Blackman's 100-plus cases book along with some additional materials and making them read the Supreme Court cases, because most of the other case books are irrelevant to a new Supreme Court, and most of the older law school faculty are left-wingers or living constitutionalists as opposed to old or new originalists. Do you think the legal academy is beyond reclaiming?
I don't know. With broader society, I'm with Brett Kavanaugh. I live on the sunrise side of the mountain. People seem to be realizing that we've had all of these excesses and a lot of weirdness in society, and there's pushing back on the woke radicalism, on all of that stuff that we've seen that was accelerated during the pandemic. In the academy, we may be past the critical mass. There may not be enough opposition. The 0.5% of professors who are non-progressive may not be enough. But I want to make clear that my book describes a
Your book, Lawless.
development. The book Lawless, yes. So we need to remember that. describes a development that is not simply the decades-old conservative complaint about hippies taking over the faculty lounge. In fact, those hippies, the Berkeley free speech movement in the 60s, those hippies would be called retrograde white supremacists now by this illiberal cabal. And by illiberal in the law school space, I mean not agreeing with the foundational classical liberal concepts of due process, free speech, equality under the law. Those are all illegitimate. We have to throw it out, burn it all down, and rebuild it. It's
Burn it all down is a well-chosen phrase for this week, Ilya Shapiro. I'll be right back with Ilya to talk more about Lawless after the break. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. Ilya Shapiro, my guest, author of the brand new book, Lawless, which I'm looking forward to reading as soon as it arrives out west because, of course, I forgot it inside the Beltway when I moved. I am
Well, this
watching...
is Hugh. Well, I advise your listeners, you got to get multiple copies for everywhere you go, multiple formats, just in case. And who knows when the government might edit it, your Kindle or your audio copy, you got to have lots of them lying around.
I agree with that, and I usually do ask authors to send 2 copies, but I was so certain I wouldn't be a nut and forget stuff that I was going to do interviews about, but I beg your forgiveness. I want to let everyone know we are following developments in Israel as they occur. If anything breaks in this last 2 segments of the program, I'll tell you about it. Ilya, I want people to understand what happened to you at Georgetown because the Lawless book is not just, in fact, it's not even the major theme of what's going on in America's academy, but the precipitating event was the disgraceful conduct of Georgetown. I hope my old friend Alex Alenikoff did not have a hand in this. Did he?
I don't think so.
Good. Alex was one of my first professors at Michigan 1,000 years ago and was a good dude, even though he's a leftist. But tell us all what happened to you after you got there. I mean, you were hired, you were in.
Well, that's the thing. It was 4 days before I was due to start my new job that I tweeted. And, you can look it all up. You can read my book, Lawless, for the whole gory details. But the dean there, not Alenikoff, but Bill Traynor, who is no woke radical, but the problem is so many of these academic leaders and law school deans, it's not that they're social justice warriors, they're spineless cowards. And it's not that he stood up for my free speech rights. It's not even that he fired me right away and would take the slings from the other side, but he decided to punt and to defer to the DEI office, the Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Affirmative Action, to investigate me. And away we went. And I had these just Kafka implies some sort of, I was threat for my life or something, but it was so farcical, Dean. Hugh. It was so sophistic. I'd have these Zooms, and it was all on Zoom, by the way, because even though this was 2022, there was still COVID hysteria at Georgetown. So I never met in person with any dean or any official, because then we'd have to be wearing masks, which would add even more surreality to the whole thing. But anyway, what did you mean when you tweeted, don't you recognize this could have been offensive? Again, I was saying that Biden should not have restricted his candidate pool by race and sex, an opinion supported by 76% of the American people, at least according to that left-wing news source, ABC News. And at the end of the day, there was no decision until the students got off campus, and then the dean decided it was safe to reinstate me on the technicality that I was not yet employed by Georgetown, so these harassment discrimination policies didn't yet apply. But
so spineless.
I celebrated that technical victory, but then I got to the fine print. I got this 10-page report from the DEI office, which made clear that if I said or wrote something similarly offensive in future, then I would be creating a hostile educational environment and I'd be back in the Star Chamber. And let's be clear what this means. This was the year when affirmative action was at the Supreme Court, a case about a graphic designer not wanting to create a website for a same-sex wedding. If I was commenting, writing as I do, as I was hired to do,
as you are good at, as you are very good at doing.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you. And that's why I was hired and celebrated by this same Dean Traynor a week before he condemned me for my appalling racist language. Anyway, if I was saying the same normal commentary, that would have offended someone, and away we went. That's why I finally realized in that last weekend, after I was technically reinstated, in talking with my lawyer, with Randy Barnett, the author of your casebook, who was my boss, the founding director of the center, and my wife, who's a better lawyer than any of us, that I had to resign. This was untenable. I could not do the job I was hired to do. And so, as one does, I published my resignation letter in the Wall Street Journal and announced my move to the Manhattan Institute on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News. And ever since, 2.5 years now I've been using this platform I've been given to shine a light on the rot in academia and especially legal education.
Ilya, you and Christopher Rufo have done more than any other two people to expose the DEI racket, and the racket is falling apart. In fact, the racket, you might have been the tipping point. Your gauntlet might have been the tipping point for the stripping away of anybody's illusions about what DEI tyrants are doing. Now, they're not terrorists, they're tyrants. And the DEI is being outlawed in places like Iowa and all of its state university system. It's all unconstitutional, in my view, from start to finish. And I'm unafraid to say that, but I'm also tenured. Do you agree with me that that was the beginning of the end of the DEI industry?
I think I might have been the tipping point for cancel culture, where every little slight got people, fired, and something out of the Chinese Cultural Revolution denounced all these things. With DEI more broadly, the jury is still out, and especially in academia, including in law schools. These places are being dragged kicking and screaming, certainly in public institutions in red states, where state legislatures, or I just saw the governor of West Virginia, Pat Morrisey, had an executive order getting rid of DEI for public policy purposes. That's great if your state constitution allows the governor to do that without even the state legislature being involved. But in a lot of these places and a lot of these so-called elite schools, your Yales, your Stanfords, they're private. And so there have to be other kinds of external, what economists call exogenous shocks. So whether that's federal investigations from the incoming Trump administration's Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education, whether that's Congress having more and more hearings. The last Congress was very good on civil rights, anti-Semitism, free speech, all of these different kinds of issues, whether it's employers and donors, which we've seen since October 7th. It's just remarkable that the heart of anti-Semitism in this country is in its most so-called progressive, educated places. Bill Ackman, billionaire donor to Harvard and a supporter of the Manhattan Institute. I've never met him personally, but thanks to him for that. He wrote a very important essay the same day that Claudine Gay resigned the Harvard presidency January last year, talking about how anti-Semitism reveals always the underlying rot. It's the canary in the coal mine.
I will be right back for one more quick segment with Ilya Shapiro. During the break, go order Lawless from Amazon.com. It's pretty easy. The last name is Shapiro. The first name is Ilya. Welcome back, America. I'm with Ilya Shapiro. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm with Ilya Shapiro, who is in Manhattan at the Manhattan Institute, where he is the director of constitutional study. He's the author of the brand new book, Lawless, which is a lot more than simply the awful tale of what happened to Ilya. I want to conclude this way, Ilya, and it's a 4-minute segment. Do you regret not being at Georgetown? Do you wish you were there? And second part of that is because not being at Georgetown means they don't have a great professor and all they've got is the Federalist Society, I think. I don't know if they have any other new originalists. What do you regret not being there?
I don't know, Hugh. Whenever I've found in my career, whenever I've tried to plan things, transitions, new jobs, whatever, it hasn't necessarily turned out the way I expected. Man plans, God laughs. So serendipity has been the name of the game for me professionally and personally in general, just being able to identify opportunities and seize them. And so I've been given an opportunity to have a heightened platform. At Georgetown, I regret not being able to teach classes. Part of the reason why I left Cato, where I had spent nearly 15 years, the Cato Institute, libertarian think tank. Part of the reason why I took the Georgetown job was to have an impact on the climate of ideas in a different way, to teach, to have on my chyron to say Georgetown University rather than a think tank, which means something different. So I didn't get a chance to do that, which is unfortunate. But This book came out of what happened. And I never intended to be a poster boy for cancel culture or DEI fights or what have you. But it's given me the opportunity to fight for what I believe, these classical liberal values of open inquiry and free speech and equal protection and limited government. I mean, all of these different things that my values have not changed. My career has simply been pushed in a different direction. So my life would be different, but this is the way that God pushed me into, I guess, and I'm happy to run with it.
I really hope everyone who's listening gets Lawless to send a message, if nothing else. You get smarter about DEI. You'll learn what happens in the academy these days, especially the legal academy. But we'll also, if it shoots up the Amazon rankings, as Christopher Rufo's book did, Manhattan Institute is really quite an amazing engine of change. Last minute, Ilya, how is the book doing, Lawless? Has it started off well?
So far, so good. So it just released yesterday as we're recording this, and it's number one in several Amazon categories. I think it's in the top 2,000 overall. And with this appearance, Hugh, I'm sure we can only go higher.
I hope so. Ilya, thank you so much for joining me. The book is Lawless. I tell everyone out there, keep your eye on Times of Israel. It looks like it's going to happen. First release tomorrow. We will have details when I return tomorrow. Looks like we've made it through the red flag event without a terrible incident. But there's lots of accountability to come. I'll be back tomorrow on Thursday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.